And before the world had name or measure, before wind had learned to wander or rivers to remember their course, there was only the eternal light, the breath of Solara, whose brilliance kindled the first sands from the void of silence. And in that breath the desert was born, endless and shimmering like the dream of a god. And from the furnace of creation, Solara shaped his children, the Darim, whose skin bore the golden hue of dawn, and whose eyes reflected the burning heart of their maker. And unto them he spoke, not in words but in flame, saying that the desert shall be their cradle and their test, their kingdom and their grave. For light is both gift and trial, and only those who walk in its full blaze without fear shall earn eternity. And the Darim built their dwellings upon the dunes and worshipped Solara with hymns of fire. And each dawn they would turn their faces to the rising sun, for they believed their souls were sparks of his light, destined to return when their time was done. In time they raised altars of gold and sandstone, towers that reached toward heaven, and at the heart of the desert rose the city of Eryndor, whose walls gleamed like molten metal, and from its spires hung banners woven from sun-dyed silk that fluttered with the heat of the day. There ruled the first king, Aramesh, chosen by Solara himself, who bore upon his brow the mark of light, a sigil that burned without consuming, symbol of divine favor. Aramesh was wise, just, and fearless, and under his reign the sands bloomed, for the light that scorched others was to him a source of life. He decreed that each dawn the people would renew the covenant of fire, the vow that bound their souls to Solara's flame, and that never should shadow be allowed to dwell within the walls of Eryndor. For shadow, he taught, was the language of the unlight, the eternal opposite, whose whispers sought to undo creation and swallow the sun. But as centuries passed and the sands shifted with time's indifferent hand, the hearts of men grew restless beneath the endless glare. They began to wonder if light alone was enough, if perhaps there was wisdom in the cool embrace of the night, for though Solara's brilliance gave life, it also blinded. And in their pride, the sons of Aramesh began to seek secrets not meant for mortal minds. Among them rose scholars and priests who studied the reflections of the sun upon crystal and water, claiming that by mastering its refraction they might harness divine essence for themselves. And from their experiments was born the first mirror flame, a captured spark of Solara's breath, held within glass and bound by words of power. It shone brighter than dawn and burned hotter than wrath, and when the high priest saw it, they trembled, for they knew that men had taken a piece of heaven into their hands. Yet King Sarath, descendant of Aramesh and ruler of Eryndor in that age, declared it a triumph, proclaiming that the time had come for mortals to stand beside gods, not beneath them. Thus began the Age of Mirrors, an era of glory and peril, when the people of Solara, intoxicated by their own brilliance, built palaces of light and fashioned weapons of fire, and even the nights glowed with the residue of their ambition. Yet among the multitude there was one who saw beyond the glare, a maiden named Seraphine, born of no noble house, but marked from birth by eyes that burned like coals. When she walked, the sands shimmered as though remembering her steps, and when she gazed into the horizon, visions came, of sons that died, of empires turned to dust, of Solara himself weeping upon his throne of flame. The priests feared her, for prophecy often bears the face of doom, and they whispered that her soul was too near to the divine, too dangerous to be contained by mortal flesh. Still, word of her spread through Eryndor, until even King Sarath summoned her to his court, curious to see the girl whose gaze could pierce the light itself. And when she came before him, clad in simple linen yet glowing with an inner radiance, the courtiers fell silent, for the air grew heavy with unseen power. The king asked her what she saw in the sun, and she replied in a voice soft yet eternal, "I see its sorrow. I see the day when light shall turn upon its children, and the sands shall drink the fire they once worshipped." The hall murmured with disbelief, but Sarath, proud and unbending, only laughed and said, "The sun is eternal, and so are we who bear its mark. What you see is fear, not prophecy." But in the hidden corners of his heart, unease took root. For he dreamed that night of Solara turning his face away, and when he woke, the dawn was blood red. And the priest whispered that an omen had come, a shadow faint but growing, cast across the desert that knew no shade, and so began the slow turning of fate, when pride would invite ruin, and light would become its own shadow. Seraphine, rejected by the court, withdrew into the wilderness, guided by voices that spoke from the heat itself. And there in the heart of the desert she beheld Solara not as God above, but as sorrowful flame within, whispering to her of the first covenant, that mortals were meant to reflect his light, not wield it, that every flame carries the seed of its own destruction when contained. And as she knelt before the burning horizon, she wept, for she saw the truth, that the kingdom's brilliance had become its blindness, and the sun itself had begun to weep for what it had made. And in the days that followed Seraphine's exile to the wilderness, strange signs began to haunt the desert. For the dunes that had always gleamed gold beneath the sun now shimmered with hues of crimson at dawn, and pillars of heat rose like spirits dancing upon the horizon, whispering words none could name. In the city of Erythra, the priests of the mirror flame redoubled their devotion to their new creation, believing that the god's power was theirs to master. And King Serath, though troubled by dreams, clung to the promise of immortality whispered by his scholars, who told him that the secret of eternal fire lay within the captured sun. They built great furnaces beneath the city's temples where the sands themselves were melted into living glass, and the air trembled with light so pure it could sear the soul. Yet with each new flame they forged, a sliver of shadow crept closer to the heart of the kingdom, unseen but growing. For every mirror that captured light also birthed reflection, and reflection is where shadow dwells. The people rejoiced, for their nights were now as bright as day. Their crops flourished under artificial dawns, and their children were born with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark, a sign. They believed that the divine blood of Solara now flowed fully in mortal veins. But Seraphine, alone among the dunes, watched with sorrow, for she knew that they were not ascending to godhood, but burning too near the source. Each night, she sat upon the edge of the world where sand met sky, and listened to the voice of the wind, which spoke not in words but in memory. It told her of the first flame, the breath of Solara that had birthed creation, and of the darkness that had been exiled when the world was new, a force not evil, but unbalanced, the necessary twin of light. To cast away all shadow, the wind whispered, is to wound the light itself, for without night there is no dawn. And Seraphine understood then that Erythra's pursuit of unbroken light was a defiance of cosmic law, an arrogance that would call forth the forgotten darkness, the unlight that slept beneath the desert's skin. She sought to return to the city to warn them, but the priest barred her from the gates, crying that she was touched by shade, a blasphemer who had turned her eyes from the god. In desperation, she went to the temple steps and sang the ancient hymn of the first covenant, her voice rising over the roar of the furnaces, so pure that the flames themselves seemed to falter and listen. But the high priest struck her down, declaring, "The light has no need of heresy." They left her broken in the dust, but as she lay dying, a single tear fell upon the sand and turned to glass, glowing faintly, and from it a whisper rose, the voice of Solara himself saying, "Not yet, my child, for the day of reckoning comes, and through you, my truth shall be reborn." Seraphine awoke beneath the stars, the first stars she had seen since birth. For in the heart of Erythra, the night sky had long been hidden by the glare of their own making. She felt the cool touch of darkness upon her skin, and realized that it was not death that she felt, but balance. She wandered the desert in a trance, guided by unseen light, until she came upon an ancient ruin, half buried by the sands, pillars carved before the first kings, etched with symbols of flame and shadow entwined. Within its depths, she found an altar of obsidian and gold, upon which burned a small, steady flame, neither bright nor dim, neither warm nor cold. And there she heard the voice of Solara, not thundering from the heavens, but whispering from the flame itself. In the beginning, I shone upon all things, and my brother, the shadow, cooled what I could not. But men feared what they could not see, and so they worshipped me alone, finding the balance that gave them life. Now their mirrors blind them, and the desert hungers for their pride. You, Seraphine, are my last mercy, the bearer of dusk, the one who shall teach light to weep and the shadow to forgive. And as she listened, the flame entered her heart, and her eyes ceased to burn. They became calm, twin orbs of molten gold and obsidian swirled together, and when she looked upon the desert, she saw the truth, that the light of Solara had grown too fierce. And the land cried for night. Back in Erythra, King Serath's glory began to twist into obsession. The mirror flame, once a symbol of divine favor, now demanded sacrifice to sustain its brilliance. The priest decreed that each new moon a chosen soul be offered, not in blood, but in light, burned to ash in the mirror flame so that their essence might feed its hunger. And though the people wept, they obeyed, for they feared the fading of the glow that guarded them from the creeping dusk. Serath himself began to change. His skin shimmered like molten glass, his eyes burned white, and his voice carried the echo of something no longer human. He claimed that Solara spoke through him, commanding ever greater offerings, and the city obeyed, blinded by devotion and terror alike. But the true Solara wept unseen, for he had not spoken to the king in 1,000 dawns, his voice drowned by the echoes of human pride. Then, one night, as the blood-red dawn broke once more, a figure appeared upon the eastern dunes. Seraphine returned from the desert, her body clothed in shadows and light, her presence both radiant and soft as twilight. The guards who saw her fell to their knees, for they felt both warmth and calm, the union of opposites. She entered Erythra without resistance, for the walls themselves seemed to part at her passing. And when she reached the great temple, the priests fled from her gaze, crying that she was the herald of the eclipse. Before the mirror flame she stood, and its light flared in fury, sensing the flame within her, its forgotten twin. And she spake unto the fire, saying, You are not the god, but his echo. You burn without mercy, yet mercy is the soul of light. You devour, yet creation was meant to give. And at her words the flame trembled, its color shifting, as though remembering the dawn before pride. King Serath descended from his throne, wrathful and glorious, his form now more light than flesh, and he raised his hand, saying, Blasphemer, you stand against the eternal sun. But Seraphine answered softly, No, I stand for him. And she raised her own hand, the light of dusk blooming in her palm, and for the first time in all the ages of the desert, day and night met as equals, their union casting a light that neither burned nor blinded, a light of truth. And in that moment, the mirror flame cracked. And when the mirror flame cracked, a sound like the breaking of a world filled the air, for its shatter was not of glass, but of light itself, splintering into 1,000 molten rays that streaked across the sky, forming a false dawn before its time. The people of Erythra fell upon their faces, for never had they seen the heavens bleed with color, and they cried that the end of the sun had come. King Serath staggered back, his hands burning as he tried to hold the fragments of the divine fire, and his voice became the roar of a storm trapped within human flesh. You have undone the covenant, he cried, though deep within him something remembered that no covenant built upon pride could endure. Seraphine stood calm amidst the storm, her shadow and her light folding together like the wings of a single creature. And she spoke not to the king, but to the sky itself. If the sun must weep, then let his tears be seeds of mercy. And from the rift above them fell drops of liquid light, raining upon the city. Soft, silver gold tears that hissed upon the burning marble and cooled it, turning fire into crystal. Where they touched the ground, flowers of glass bloomed in silence, but Serath would not yield. The fire that had once blessed him now devoured his heart, whispering promises of dominion beyond death. "I am the sun," he thundered, and his body erupted into brilliance so fierce that the world dimmed around him. His form stretched upward, molten veins binding to the heavens, until he became a pillar of living light, a false sun rising above the city, brighter even than Solara's own dawn. The priests, maddened by devotion and terror, prostrated themselves and offered their lives, stepping willingly into his glow, their souls dissolving into the flame until their screams became hymns. Yet for every voice that joined him, the sky darkened a little more, for the balance was broken, and the desert's shadow began to stir beneath the earth, rolling like a buried tide. Seraphine saw that the end was near if she did not act. She lifted her hands and called upon the name of Solara, not in worship, but in remembrance. "O Father of Fire, look upon what your children have wrought. We sought your face and became blind. We reached for your heart and burned our own. If there be mercy in the sun, let it fall now, before all turns to ash." For a heartbeat there was silence. Then the wind that had once whispered to her in the wilderness rose again, and within it came the true voice of Solara, weary yet boundless, saying, "Daughter of dusk, the light must fall to rise anew." And from the horizon came the sound of thunder without rain, for the god himself was descending. His radiance veiled so that it might not destroy what remained of his world. The pillar that was Sarath writhed as Solara's shadow passed over it. "No," he screamed. "You will not take my light." And from him burst a torrent of molten fury that tore through the city, toppling towers, melting statues, and turning the holy streets into rivers of fire. Seraphine waded through the ruin, untouched, her every step birthing twilight where the flames recoiled. At last she stood before the pillar and pressed her hand upon its base. "You were the chosen of the sun," she whispered, "but you forgot the night that makes him whole." And she drew from within her the flame of balance, neither gold nor black, but a soft, shimmering amber, and pressed it into the heart of Sarath's fire. For a moment, all was still. Then came a sound like a sigh from the depths of creation, and the false sun burst, its light scattering into the heavens, leaving behind a single figure, the king, mortal again, kneeling amid the ruin, tears of molten glass upon his cheeks. He looked upon Seraphine and saw not his enemy but the truth, that in seeking eternity he had destroyed the gift of time, and in worshipping the sun he had forgotten its love. "Forgive me," he murmured, his voice barely a spark. "The light blinded me." And Seraphine, who had once been cast out and scorned, placed her hand upon his brow and said, "The light forgives when it learns to rest." Then she turned to the sky, where Solara's radiance shone faintly through the smoke, and she saw that the god wept indeed, his tears falling as motes of dawn upon the dead, raising from the ashes small shapes of life, birds of glass that took flight, carrying fragments of his sorrow to the corners of the world. Thus ended the reign of the Sun King, and Erythra lay half buried, its towers frozen in crystal, its streets silent but gleaming under the first true dusk the desert had known. The people who survived came forth from the ruins and knelt before Seraphine, calling her the Twilight Saint, the one who healed the fire. But she shook her head and said, "I am no saint, only a mirror that remembers the sun's tears." And when they begged her to lead them, she pointed to the horizon, where dawn and night met in perfect stillness. "Go there," she said. "Build not in the name of gods, but in the rhythm of day and night. For only those who honor both shall endure." And as the first evening star rose above the cooling sands, Seraphine vanished into the twilight, her form dissolving into a shimmer that lingered between light and shadow, a promise that balance, once learned, would never be lost again. And in the centuries that followed the fall of Erythra, the desert grew vast again, swallowing marble and gold beneath its endless waves of sand, until only the tallest spires glimmered faintly at dawn like broken spears of glass. Yet the memory of the Sun Kingdom did not die. It slept, buried beneath dunes that hummed softly with the heat of forgotten prayers. The survivors, scattered and humbled, wandered westward beneath skies where the stars now shone unchallenged by eternal day. They were no longer the people of the flame, but those who called themselves the children of the twilight, for they had seen both light's blessing and curse. In their songs, they spoke not of gods to be worshipped, but of a balance to be honored, the eternal dance between dawn and dusk. They built no temples of stone, only circles in the sand where they lit two fires, one golden, one blue, each reflecting upon the other. And when the winds blew, they whispered the name of Seraphine, not as a goddess, but as the flame that had learned to breathe. Generations passed like the turning of constellations. The children of the twilight became tribes, the tribes became wanderers, and in time they forgot the precise truth of what had come before, remembering only fragments, that a woman of light had tamed the sun, that a king of fire had fallen, and that the desert was alive with memory. Yet even as myth blurred into legend, there were some who still felt her presence. When the horizon shimmered at dusk and the air grew cool with unseen calm, they said that Seraphine walked once more, unseen but felt, the soft glow in the heart of every hearth, the peace that follows storm. Among them rose a child, born under an eclipse, a rare night when the moon crossed before the sun, and the desert sky turned to amber twilight. His name was Kale, and when he first opened his eyes, the elder saw reflected within them both dawn and dusk intertwined. They whispered that Solara's last promise had returned, for the world had begun to tilt again. Kyle grew among the tribes as a wanderer of dreams. He spoke to the desert as though it were alive, and the winds seemed to answer. He learned the stories of old from the nomads' fires, how Erythra had fallen, how Seraphine had walked between light and dark. Yet in his heart he felt not sorrow, but longing, as though the ruins still called to him. At night he would gaze eastward where the dunes glowed faintly with ghostlight and ask the stars, "Does the sun still weep?" And the stars, which remember more than men, whispered faint echoes of a forgotten flame. When Kyle came of age, he left the tribes and set out alone into the heart of the desert, guided by visions that danced between dream and memory. For in his sleep, he saw the city of glass rising once more, its towers unbroken, its people bathed in golden fire, and at its center, a woman with eyes of molten dusk who spoke his name. He journeyed for 40 nights, following a path no map could hold, until he reached a valley where the sand sang beneath his feet. There, half buried beneath the dune, he found the ruins of Erythra's great temple, its mirror floors cracked but still faintly reflecting the sky. In its heart stood a single shard of the mirror flame, dim but alive, pulsing softly like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. As Kale approached, the air thickened with memory, and he heard whispers, not of ghosts, but of echoes. The cries of priests, the sorrow of Seraphine, the sigh of Solara as he withdrew beyond the veil of light. The shard called to him, glowing brighter with each step, until his own shadow fused with its reflection. Then he heard the voice that had once spoken to Seraphine. "The cycle turns, child of balance. The light and the shadow have slept long enough." Kyle fell to his knees as visions flooded his mind, of the world as it had been before time began, when Solara and his brother, the Shadow, danced as one across the void, weaving creation from the harmony of opposites. He saw their separation, the birth of day and night, and the pain that came when mortals worshipped one and feared the other. And he saw that the balance restored by Seraphine had begun to wane. For though the children of the twilight had honored dusk and dawn, the rest of the world had forgotten, building kingdoms of blinding cities where light ruled once again without rest. "Go forth," the voice said, "and remind them that every sun must set, lest the world burn anew." And so Kale rose, his eyes glowing with the twin fire of dawn and dusk, and he took the shard of the mirror flame, which no longer burned but shimmered softly with both warmth and coolness. He bound it to a staff and walked the world, preaching not of gods, but of balance. Many mocked him, calling him a desert-mad prophet. Some feared him, for wherever he passed, light seemed to dim gently, revealing stars at midday or shadows that danced without menace. Yet others listened, those weary of endless glare, those who longed for peace after generations of conquest. They gathered around him, calling themselves the Keepers of Dusk, and from their devotion grew not temples, but sanctuaries of reflection, places where people came not to pray, but to listen to silence and learn the rhythm of day's breath. But peace, even in legend, never lasts. Far to the north, in lands untouched by the Sun Kingdom's ruin, there rose a power that worshipped only flame, the dominion of Aurion, ruled by lords who claimed descent from Solara's forgotten spark. They built spires of fire that pierced the heavens and declared that the sun was theirs to command. When word reached them of a wanderer who spoke of dusk, they called him heretic and sent forth emissaries of light to cleanse the heresy from the earth. Thus began the Second War of Flame, though few yet understood it. Kael did not seek battle, but the light of Aurion was fierce and blind, seeing his shadowed followers as blasphemy. The first clash came upon the plains of glass, once the floor of Erythra's outer wall, where the sun's reflection cut like knives and the air shimmered with heat. Kael stood at the heart of his small host, the shard of balance glowing faintly in his hand, and when the armies of light charged, he raised his staff and whispered the name of Seraphine. The sky dimmed, not with storm, but with calm, a vast twilight that settled like a breath over the battlefield. The soldiers of Aurion halted in fear, for their armor of mirrored gold no longer blazed but reflected only stillness. Kael spoke softly, his voice carrying to every ear. You who wield the sun, remember that even it must rest. Lay down your fire before it consumes you. But pride, the oldest flame, cannot hear reason. The Aurion lords raised their banners and unleashed their burning lances, yet as they flew, their fire faltered, curling into smoke that shimmered and became birds of light, the same that had once risen from Solara's tears. And for the first time since the fall of Erythra, the world saw that light and dusk were not enemies but kin. And when the light of Aurion struck against the twilight of Kael, the heavens themselves trembled, for two suns now burned above the world, one the true, eternal Solara, distant and weary, and the other a false flame born of mortal arrogance, blazing defiantly in the northern sky. The Dominion's priests proclaimed this second sun as proof of their divine right, crying, "Behold, the sun god has doubled his glory." Yet those who walked beneath its glare found no warmth, only searing light that cracked the earth and bleached the sky to white emptiness. The crops withered, rivers shrank, and men began to dream of shadows that fled from them in terror. Across the world, the balance faltered once again. Kael and his followers journeyed through lands scorched and trembling, seeking to remind the hearts of men that the sun, untempered, is but fire without love. But the Dominion's armies pursued them, wielding weapons of mirrored flame that reflected every strike, their armor shining so bright it blinded even their own. In those days, the world became a field of warring light, and the sky itself seemed aflame. Kael's twilight could calm the fire for a moment, but the Dominion's zeal spread faster than dusk could heal. The Keepers of Dusk began to falter, their faith tested by endless glare. Kael stood atop a dune of ash and cried out to the heavens, "Solara, do you yet live, or have you forsaken the world you once warmed?" And for long hours there was no answer, only the hiss of burning wind. But as the false sun reached its zenith, a shadow passed across its face, faint yet vast, and the air grew still. The warriors of Aurion faltered, for they saw that the shadow was shaped like a great wing, spanning the horizon. Then came a voice older than mountains, softer than breath, yet heavy as the sea. "I am not two, but one, and what is stolen from the light must be returned." The second sun quivered, and a wave of silence swept the battlefield. From its heart burst a storm of molten radiance, and within it appeared the form of Solara, the true sun god, veiled in golden haze so that the mortal eye might survive his presence. Yet even through the veil, his sorrow was visible, for he beheld how men had split his gift and made war upon its halves. "Children of my flame," he said, his voice trembling with ages of grief. "You have worshipped my light, but scorned my warmth. You have taken my name and turned it into a weapon. You have forgotten that every dawn owes its grace to the night it ends." Then his gaze fell upon Chaol, whose twilight shimmered gently in the dying glare, and upon the lords of Aurion, whose armor blazed like defiance. "The time of kings and priests is done," Solara said. "If you would be my children, you must first unmake what you have built. But pride is the last to die." The High Lord of Aurion, radiant in armor woven of living fire, stepped forth and cried, "You are not the sun, I am. For we have forged light that answers to our will." And he raised his spear of mirrored gold and hurled it at the god himself. It struck Solara's veil and shattered into 1,000 rays that fell upon the earth like shards of frozen lightning. Where they struck, cities burned to glass, and mountains split, releasing rivers of molten stone. Solara did not strike back, for his wrath was not destruction but revelation. He turned to Chaol and said, "You bear the flame of balance, child of dusk. The time has come to join it to mine." And Chaol understood that what Seraphine had once begun must now be completed, not to destroy light or shadow, but to bind them forever. So Chaol raised his staff, the shard of the mirror flame gleaming softly at its tip. He walked through the battlefield untouched by fire, and as he passed, the warriors of Aurion fell silent, for his eyes held both dawn and night intertwined. Standing before Solara, he lifted the staff high and spoke the ancient words first sung by Seraphine. "Let the light rest, that it may rise anew." And from the shard poured a wave of amber dusk that wrapped around the god like a mantle, dimming his radiance but deepening his warmth. The world, too, grew softer, the burning skies cooling into hues of gold and violet, the cracked earth sighing as rain fell for the first time in an age. But the Dominion's lords, seeing their false sun falter, screamed in fury. "He dims our glory," they cried. "Strike him down!" They charged, but their weapons melted in their hands, their mirrors clouding with shadow. The false sun began to collapse, its blinding light folding inward until it became a dark sphere, pulsing with unspent rage. "It cannot be unmade by mercy alone," Solara warned. "For what man creates in pride, only man may end." Then Chaol looked to his followers, who knelt weeping among the ashes and said, "Then let this be our offering, not of blood, but of surrender." And he placed his hand upon the shard, drawing from it all that remained of his strength, his memories, his soul. His body dissolved into twilight, his spirit merging with the flame, until he became the bridge between the true sun and the false. The sphere shuddered, cracked, and then burst, releasing a final wave of light so vast it encircled the world. When it faded, there was only one sun in the sky, neither too fierce nor too dim, its rays gentle and alive. Where Chaol had stood, there now burned a small flame, not gold, not black, but amber, steady and calm. Solara looked upon it and said, "So ends the war of two suns. So begins the age of balance." And from his tears again fell the birds of light, the tears of Solara, who carried fragments of Chaol's twilight flame to every corner of the earth. The dominion of Aurion was no more. Its towers melted into rivers of glass that flowed toward the sea. The keepers of dusk scattered, carrying their teachers' words to the forgotten lands, where men learned again to honor both dawn and night. Solara withdrew beyond the veil, his task done, his heart at peace for the first time since the first flame. But before he vanished, his voice whispered across the world, "When the light grows proud, dusk shall rise again, and when the night despairs, dawn will follow. And so it was written in the last chronicle of the desert that two suns once warred for the sky, and a mortal child taught them peace. The ruins of Erythra slept beneath the sands. Yet each evening, when the horizon blazed amber and violet, the people said that Seraphine and Chaol walked there together. She the dusk that forgives, he the dawn that remembers. And the desert, eternal and patient, sang softly beneath them, its song neither of ending nor of beginning, but of balance everlasting. And when the echoes of the War of Two Suns faded into memory, the world itself seemed to breathe anew, for the desert, the rivers, and the mountains had learned the rhythm of light and shadow, and even the wind carried a softer tone, whispering through dunes and canyons like a hymn to the balance restored. The children of twilight, now known simply as the Keepers, wandered far and wide, teaching those who would listen that no sun is eternal, no night endless, and that all life must honor the passage of both. They brought seeds of glass flowers and amber flames to barren lands, showing mortals that light need not scorch, and darkness need not suffocate, and everywhere they went, small villages and cities arose, shaped by the harmony of day and night, where children played under skies of gentle gold and violet, learning the stories of Seraphine and Chaol as living memory, not mere myth. And yet, even in this new age, the world remembered the lesson of pride. For scattered among the deserts, high mountains, and fertile valleys were those who still craved the brilliance of the sun alone, who built towers and altars and declared themselves kings in defiance of the hidden law, seeking to summon fire from the heavens without thought of shadow. And wherever they did, the balance shivered. The sand whispered warnings, and storms of molten heat rose briefly before dissolving back into calm. Chaol's amber flame, left in the heart of the first shattered mirror, became a lodestar for the ages, and those who sought wisdom journeyed from distant lands to touch it. For even in its quiet glow, it contained the memory of both Seraphine's mercy and his courage, teaching that power without temperance leads always to ruin. Travelers spoke of seeing his figure in the desert twilight, sometimes a man of dusk and dawn walking across the sands, sometimes a soft shimmer upon the horizon. And the elders said that he remained, not as ruler, but as guardian, neither god nor mortal, the bridge between extremes, guiding the world without commanding it. The nations that rose after Erythra's fall did so under this teaching, crafting laws and ways of life that balanced toil with rest, war with peace, and ambition with humility. And the land itself seemed to respond. For springs and rivers flowed steadily, crops ripened in abundance, and the sun no longer scorched beyond measure, while night brought relief and calm. And even the smallest creatures of the desert thrived, for the rhythms of balance were restored. But balance is never permanent, for even the stars know that cycles must turn. And as decades became centuries, and centuries became 1,000 years, the world changed again, as new civilizations rose from the memory of the old. Some claimed descent from the children of twilight, tracing bloodlines to Chaol and Seraphine, though even those who remembered the truth whispered cautiously, lest their pride awaken shadows anew. Others, drawn by ambition and the desire for glory, sought to reclaim the glory of the sun, building spires that reached for the sky and harnessing fire through mirrors, lenses, and clever machines, ignorant of the ancient lesson that light untempered by night is destruction. In these places, the amber flame called once more, flickering in the hands of the vigilant, warning, guiding, offering hope. And wherever the flame touched, harmony returned. For the world itself remembered the first covenant of fire and shadow, inscribed not in stone alone, but in the heart of the land. And yet, in the quiet hours of twilight, Seraphine's presence was felt anew, soft as wind across the dunes, guiding mortals away from arrogance, teaching them patience and reflection. Her voice, faint as the shimmer of a desert mirage, said always that even kings and nations may rise and fall, but the truth of balance endures beyond all pride, and that the sun and the shadow must forever dance as one. In distant kingdoms, children learned the songs of dusk and dawn as lullabies, and artists painted skies not in blinding gold alone, but with violet, amber, and silver, recreating in miniature the horizon that Chaol had walked. The deserts themselves held memories of the fallen towers, the glass flowers and the rivers of molten stone. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, the sands would sing of the courage of mortals who dared to walk between extremes, of the love of a woman who tamed the sun, and of a boy who became the bridge between light and shadow. And so it was that the Age of Balance began, not with a decree nor with a conquest, but with memory, with quiet teaching, and with the vigilance of those who understood the rhythm of the world. And everywhere the sun rose and set, it cast both glory and rest upon the earth, reminding all that the cycle continues, eternal and unbroken, and that even in the smallest flame, the lesson of Seraphine and Chaol endures, that the world, when loved with wisdom, may survive all pride, all ambition, and all folly, for the song of light and shadow is the song of life itself, and it is older than kings, older than gods, and it will continue long after the tallest towers have crumbled into the sands of time. And as centuries unfolded, new kingdoms rose from the memory of the children of twilight, each claiming fragments of the old deserts, rivers, and mountains, yet each unaware of the deeper covenant that Chaol had preserved in the amber flame. Some sought glory in towers of gold and mirrors that reflected only light, while others, humbled by the stories of Erythra's fall, built cities in quiet harmony with the land, honoring both dawn and dusk and in every kingdom. Scholars debated the ancient prophecies, reading the shards of history like runes, seeing in the desert's shifting sands the lessons of pride, ambition, and mercy. Among these kingdoms arose Cerinthia, a city of scholars and artisans, where children were taught to read the sky and the winds as one reads a sacred book, learning that light without rest breeds sorrow, and shadow without warmth breeds despair. And it was in Cerinthia that the amber flame was first carried beyond the deserts, brought carefully to the scholar's tower by a wandering keeper named Lysera, who understood that balance must be preserved not only in one land, but in the hearts of all peoples. And when she entered the city, the amber flame glowed softly in her hands, illuminating the marble halls and gardens, showing the inhabitants that the world itself holds memory, that even in streets paved with stone and adorned with art, the essence of the first covenant endures, waiting for those who dare to see it. Yet far to the north, where the lands were colder and the sun less constant, the remnants of the dominion of Aurion had taken root again, their ambition unquenched by the memory of Chaol's victory, and a new generation of lords, proud and ruthless, began to gather armies of fire-wielders and engineers who sought to recreate the second sun, believing that mortal hands could finally surpass the lessons of history. Rumors of their growing strength reached Cerinthia, carried by traders, nomads, and the wind itself, and Lysera, sensing the stirring of imbalance, called together the keepers from distant lands to counsel beneath the twilight sky. They came in small numbers, silent yet vigilant, their eyes reflecting both hope and sorrow, and they debated for nights upon nights. For the question was grave. Should they intervene directly, risking war, or should they teach patience and trust in the natural rhythm, hoping that pride would falter without mortal hands forcing its fall? And in the center of their council stood the amber flame, warm yet steady, reminding all who gazed upon it that light and shadow must coexist, and that action without wisdom brings ruin even when intentions are pure. Among the council arose a young keeper named Eryndor, whose ancestors had walked with Chaol and whose eyes mirrored the soft amber glow of the flame. He spoke with a voice like the wind through desert canyons, warning that the northern lords would not wait for balance, that fire, once kindled in pride, consumes all it touches, and that sooner or later, the shadows of the world would rise to meet it. The elders nodded, for they had seen such ambition before, yet caution bound them to delay, for history had taught that mortals who act too quickly risk repeating the mistakes of the fallen kingdoms. And so it was decided, a small host of keepers, led by Eryndor and guided by the amber flame, would journey north to observe and subtly influence events, teaching those who sought power that the light of Solara cannot be commanded without surrendering the wisdom of the shadow. The journey north was perilous, for the lands beyond the deserts were harsh and unyielding, Mountains pierced the sky, rivers roared like beasts, and forests whispered secrets that mortals had long forgotten. Yet Eryndor and his companions moved with purpose, carrying the flame as both guide and guardian. Along the way, they encountered tribes who had never heard of Erythra, who worshipped fire and sun without knowledge of its dangers. And with patience and humility, the keepers shared stories of Seraphine, Kale, and the Age of Balance, showing in parables and visions the cost of pride and the virtue of harmony. And in each village, in each gathering of elders, the amber flame glowed brighter, feeding not on destruction but on understanding, and the people began to see the truth of the world's rhythm, learning that night is as precious as day, and that to command fire without respect is to invite its wrath. Yet in the north, the lords of the dominion of Aurion grew impatient. They had glimpsed the flickering amber light in visions and dreams, and many believed it a challenge, a rival flame to be crushed before it could extinguish their dominion. They called upon engineers to craft new mirrors, new machines, new weapons of blazing fire, and their armies marched like a tide of molten gold across the plains, melting forests, scorching rivers, and leaving echoes of ruin in their wake. Eryndor and his keepers, small in number but vast in purpose, watched from the mountains and deserts, feeling the tension rise like a storm, and they knew that the coming confrontation would test all that Seraphine and Kale had achieved. But even as they prepared, they carried hope, for the amber flame reminded them that balance is never destroyed entirely, and that the courage of a few can withstand the arrogance of many when guided by wisdom. And so the world prepared. The stage set for a clash that was not merely of armies, but of principles, of unchecked ambition versus tempered humility, of brilliance without rest versus harmony with shadow. In every city and village, whispers spread of the approaching trial, of the child of dusk and dawn who had once bridged the divide, and of the keepers who carried the last flame of balance. The sky above grew restless, flickering with heat and light, as though the heavens themselves anticipated the outcome, and even the animals of the forests and deserts paused in uneasy stillness, sensing the turning of fate. And Eryndor, standing upon a high cliff where the wind sang through rock and sand, gazed northward, the amber flame glowing steadily in his hands, and whispered to the world, "Let them come, for we carry the memory of all who walked before, and the light of the sun alone cannot endure without the shadow to hold it." Thus began the trial of balance, and the stage was set for a war that would decide not only the fate of kingdoms, but the enduring law of the world, that pride must bow to wisdom, that light must yield to shadow, and that the covenant of fire, begun in the heart of Erythra and carried by Seraphine and Kale, must continue to guide all who walk beneath the eternal sun. And as the northern lords advanced with armies of mirrored fire and steel, their banners blazing in the sky like molten sunbeams, the world seemed to hold its breath, for the plains themselves had learned the memory of ruin, and even the mountains whispered caution to the wind. Eryndor, standing atop the ridge of the Ember Cliff, watched the approach, the amber flame steady in his hands, casting a soft glow upon the faces of the keepers who had gathered with him, their robes swaying in the heated gusts that carried the scent of distant flame. "The hour is upon us," he said, his voice a low hum against the roar of the approaching host. "Remember that we do not march to conquer, but to preserve. Our strength lies not in fire alone, but in balance. The northern lords see only brilliance. We see both light and shadow. If they cannot learn, we shall show them the cost of pride." And with these words, the keepers descended from the cliffs like a river of amber dusk, moving silently over dunes and broken rock, guiding their small force toward the heart of the advancing armies. The northern host spread across the plains like a tide of gold, its soldiers armored in mirrors that reflected sunlight so fiercely that even the horizon seemed to burn. Each banner bore the emblem of Aurion, a sun split in two, one half golden, one half white, and the men chanted hymns of fire that made the very air tremble. Engineers walked alongside them, holding instruments of flame that crackled and hissed, creating light so fierce it could blister the skin and scorch the earth. Yet even as they marched, small omens of imbalance appeared. Birds fell from the sky. Rivers boiled at their edges, and the sands of distant deserts whispered warnings no human ear could fully hear. The northern lords, proud and fearless, paid no heed, for ambition blinds even the wisest, and they believed themselves the chosen of Solara reborn, masters of light and destiny alike. Eryndor and the keepers advanced cautiously, their path winding through valleys and dunes, using the amber flame not as a weapon but as a shield of guidance, bending light and shadow together to cloak their approach. Along the way, they encountered villages caught in the path of destruction, their crops smoldering under the relentless glare, and the keepers halted to teach the villagers the lessons of twilight. How to temper sun with shadow, how to rest under the heat, how to plant not for day alone, but for the rhythm of night. Many joined them willingly, carrying supplies, offering knowledge, and spreading stories of Seraphine and Kale, so that the power of the amber flame reached beyond the keepers' small numbers, filling hearts with courage and minds with wisdom. And as they moved closer to the northern armies, Eryndor felt the weight of history pressing upon him, the ghosts of Erythra, the tears of Solara, the sacrifices of Kale, all converging in this moment of reckoning, demanding vigilance, balance, and unyielding resolve. The first encounter came on the plains of glass, where the remnants of Erythra's outer walls had once shimmered beneath the sun. The northern lords had built massive siege towers of reflective metal and fire, and their engineers unleashed devices that hurled molten light across the plains, cutting furrows into the earth and burning the grass to ash. Eryndor raised the amber flame, and it pulsed outward, bending light into soft twilight, diffusing the molten rays so that they scalded neither soil nor soldier. The northern soldiers recoiled, unsure of what power this small force wielded, yet they pressed forward, calling upon their lords to strike the keepers down. And then, for the first time in generations, the skies themselves seemed to respond. The sun dimmed slightly, clouds of golden mist swirling as though remembering the covenant of old, and even the wind carried whispers of warning through the ranks, telling those who listened that the world itself abhors unchecked pride. The battle began not with swords, but with understanding. Eryndor and his companions moved like shadows through the glare, touching banners, bending the light of the Lord's mirrors into soft reflections that revealed their soldiers' fear, their hesitation. He spoke to the northern generals, his voice carrying across the plain. See what your brilliance blinds you to. The world is alive, and even the sun bends to its rhythm. Lay down your fire and learn balance, or the land itself will teach you the cost. Many laughed, thinking it mockery, but some, glimpsing the amber glow and the calm of the keepers, faltered, unsure if they fought for glory or folly. And Eryndor did not strike. He merely walked, the flame pulsing in his hand, a gentle force that whispered of patience, mercy, and the enduring covenant. Yet ambition is deaf to whispers. The High Lord of Aurion, armored in living gold and crowned with mirrors, raised his voice above the clash of armies. This child of dusk dares lecture the masters of the sun? Then let fire answer! And he unleashed the full force of the mirrored sun, hurling molten rays across the plains, melting rock, igniting forests, and turning the battlefield into a furnace. Eryndor lifted the amber flame high, and it radiated a calm so profound that it absorbed the fire, bending it into gentle streams that cooled the earth, leaving it unmarred. The soldiers of Aurion, seeing their power fail, began to waver, their faith shaken, for the keeper's quiet strength demonstrated that mastery of light without humility is empty. And in that instant, many of the northern soldiers knelt, not in surrender to Eryndor, but in understanding of the truth they had forgotten. That light alone, untempered, burns everything it touches, but the High Lord would not yield. Furious, he called forth a second wave of fire, the sun itself seemingly captured within his mirrored weapons, and the air burned with intensity that rivaled midday. Eryndor raised his staff, and with a whisper to the amber flame, he invoked the memory of Kale and Seraphine, weaving shadow into light, cooling brilliance with calm. and the field became a dance of radiance and twilight, neither consuming nor weak. The soldiers of Aurion faltered, then hesitated, then paused, for the miracle of balance showed them a truth that had eluded their forebears. Power is nothing without wisdom. Pride is ruin, and even the mightiest flame must bow to harmony. And as the northern lords looked upon the amber glow, they saw reflected not only themselves, but the sun and the shadow entwined. And for the first time in generations, they understood that the age of unchecked brilliance had ended. And so, though the battle raged, it was not won by blood or fire, but by the quiet persistence of balance, the gentle insistence that the world itself demands respect, and the courage of a few who remembered the lessons of old. The northern lords, humbled though still proud, withdrew to consider the wisdom of the keepers, and the plains fell silent, the echoes of molten fire fading into a calm twilight that stretched across the horizon. Eryndor, standing upon the battlefield, looked to the amber flame and whispered a vow. As long as it burns, we shall remind the world that light and shadow are not enemies, but kin, and that the covenant endures beyond kings, beyond empires, beyond time. And the wind carried his words across the plains, through the mountains and deserts, and to every corner of the lands touched by sun and shadow, as if the very world itself had heard and promised to remember. And when the northern lords withdrew, humbled though still proud, the world itself seemed to exhale, the plains and deserts, mountains and rivers, all settling into the rhythm of balance once more. For even the echoes of fire had learned to temper themselves, and the amber flame pulsed gently in Eryndor's hands. A beacon not of conquest, but of enduring harmony. Across the lands, villagers and cities alike began to rebuild, not as they had been before Erythra, but in accordance with the wisdom of dusk and dawn. Homes were oriented to catch the soft glow of early morning and the cool shadow of evening. Gardens were planted with species that thrived under both light and night. Fountains and canals reflected the sky in colors of amber, violet, and gold, reminding all who beheld them that the sun and shadow are two halves of the same whole. In Cerinthia, scholars wrote chronicles that recorded not only history but principle, teaching that ambition without temperance leads to ruin, and that every civilization must honor the cycles of creation. The amber flame, carried from village to village by keepers and emissaries, became a symbol of vigilance, its glow reminding the world that balance is never a gift, but a responsibility, and that each generation must learn to hold it, lest pride awaken anew. Eryndor himself traveled from city to city, teaching rulers and commoners alike the principles of twilight, how to measure power with wisdom, how to temper joy with patience, and how to see beyond the glare of the sun to the shadows that give depth and meaning. In his travels, he encountered rulers who resisted, fearing that restraint would weaken their dominion, and he faced skepticism, anger, and doubt, yet he never faltered, for he carried the memory of Kael and Seraphine in his spirit, and the amber flame whispered courage to him in every challenge. Some lords attempted to recreate the brilliance of the northern armies, but the keeper's teachings and the subtle influence of the flame ensured that their ambitions were tempered, that their cities grew not only in splendor but in understanding. And even the armies that once sought domination now learned that true strength lies not in burning others to dust, but in nurturing life beneath the sun's watchful eye. Meanwhile, the world beyond the deserts began to heal from centuries of imbalance. Forests regrew where fire had scorched, rivers flowed with renewed vigor, and animals returned to lands they had abandoned, following the rhythm of balanced day and night. In the mountains, glaciers and snowfields mirrored the golden light, reflecting it with cool serenity, and even the winds carried memory of the first covenant, whispering stories of Seraphine and Kael to travelers, merchants, and wandering sages. Children born in this era grew up learning of both sun and shadow, their eyes attuned to the subtle shifts of the world, their hearts capable of awe without arrogance, and their spirits resilient to the extremes of heat and cold. For the teaching of balance was now as much a part of the earth as the sand, the river, and the sky. And yet, even in this renewed age, subtle trials arose. Small kingdoms, ambitious and curious, sought to test the limits of power, to capture the amber flame, to bend the lessons of balance to their own desire. Each time they did, the flame responded, not with destruction, but with illumination, reflecting their ambitions back upon them, showing both their strength and their folly. Many repented and learned, integrating the wisdom into their rule, while others faltered and fell, becoming cautionary tales whispered in the night. And Eryndor, observing from high ridges and the heart of the deserts, continued his journey, walking between cities and forests, teaching, guiding, and reminding the world that the covenant of light and shadow is eternal, and that vigilance is the price of harmony. In Cerinthia, a grand council was formed, composed of scholars, keepers, and rulers who had learned the lessons of fire and dusk. They codified laws not merely of men, but of the land, declaring that no ruler may claim dominion over the sun or shadow alone, that all decrees must honor the cycles of creation, and that knowledge, like light, must be tempered by reflection. Festivals arose, celebrating the harmony of day and night, where people gathered beneath skies of gold and violet to sing, dance, and recount the stories of Seraphine, Kyle, and the first keepers. Artists painted murals that captured not only light but the depth of shadow, while poets wove tales that taught morality through rhythm, echoing the very pulse of the world. And the amber flame, carried atop the highest towers, glowed steadily, a constant reminder of the covenant, its light neither fierce nor dim, but perfectly tempered, the symbol of a new era that had learned from the errors of the past. Even the northern lands, once ablaze with ambition and arrogance, began to change. The lords who survived the trial of the plains of glass implemented measures to honor the cycles, planting trees and creating shaded gardens, tempering their armies with discipline rather than domination, and teaching their heirs that pride without humility leads to ruin. Travelers from distant lands came to witness the harmony, bringing knowledge, art, and culture from across the world, creating a web of learning and understanding that connected the kingdoms, the deserts, and the mountains. The Song of Balance, first sung by Seraphine and echoed by Kael, became the guiding rhythm of civilization, spreading silently, inexorably, across every land touched by sun and shadow, and so the Age of Balance solidified, not through conquest, but through teaching, memory, and the steady glow of the amber flame. The world, scarred yet resilient, flourished under skies tempered by both light and dusk, and mortals learned the eternal lesson that ambition, unchecked, leads to ruin, but tempered by wisdom. It can create civilizations that endure for millennia. And when Eryndor finally rested atop the cliffs of Embercliff, looking westward toward the deserts, eastward toward the mountains, and northward toward lands once ablaze with pride, he whispered softly to the amber flame, "The covenant endures, not in kings or armies, but in hearts that remember, in eyes that see beyond brilliance, in hands that build without burning." And the wind carried his words across the world, through villages, cities, forests, and plains, so that every living thing, from the smallest flower to the tallest tree, knew that the Age of Balance had truly begun, and that the lessons of Seraphine and Kael would endure for all time. And as the Age of Balance unfolded, the world flourished beneath skies tempered by the harmony of dawn and dusk, yet even in this time of prosperity, shadows lingered where memory had faded and ambition had taken root unseen. For in distant corners of the northern realms and the high mountains, lords and scholars, unheeding the lessons of Erythra and the trials of the plains of glass, began to whisper of power untethered, of fire that could surpass the amber flame, and of suns that might burn forever without rest, and their hearts, though small in number, bore the same pride that had once doomed kingdoms, growing quietly in secret while the world celebrated its calm. Eryndor, ever vigilant, sensed the subtle shifts in the winds, the faint tremors in the earth, the barely perceptible flicker in the amber flame, and he knew that even as peace reigned in the cities and villages, there were those who would test it, who would awaken the ancient ambition that once birthed devastation. And he gathered the keepers from distant lands, their robes flowing like twilight across the sands and mountains, teaching them not only to preserve but to observe. for balance requires not only wisdom but vigilance, and even a single ember of unchecked desire can set the world ablaze. In the northern peaks, hidden beneath the shadow of glaciers, a group calling themselves the Heirs of Aurion had begun to reconstruct the mirrors of old, refining them with knowledge that had been lost for centuries, blending fire with science, ambition with cunning, and they sought to create a second sun that would eclipse all others, believing that their dominion could be eternal, that the mistakes of the past belonged to the weak, and that only through brilliance untempered by shadow could the world be perfected. They labored in silence, their tunnels echoing with the hum of molten energy and the hiss of flame, unaware that their efforts were watched by the keepers, whose shadows flitted among the cliffs and valleys, invisible yet attentive, whose presence reminded the ambitious that the world remembers and that history is not easily denied. And when Eryndor saw the faint glow of their secret fires in the distance, he called his keepers together and said, "The test comes anew, for pride sleeps lightly in the hearts of men. We must not strike with force, but with wisdom, for to destroy them would repeat the errors of Erythra. We must guide, temper, and illuminate the shadows, lest the cycle of ruin return." And so the keepers moved carefully, using the amber flame not as a weapon but as a beacon, its glow weaving through the valleys and forests, bending shadows into soft light, revealing not only the ambitions of the heirs but their fears, their doubt, and their potential for understanding. For even in the most hardened hearts, there exists a flicker of reason when touched by the balance of twilight, and it was in this flicker that the keepers placed their hope. They approached the hidden valley under the cover of dusk, and there, among the molten streams and mirrors, they witnessed the heirs' devotion not to the world, but to the illusion of absolute brilliance. And Eryndor understood that this confrontation would not be won by force, but by showing them the consequences of untempered pride, by letting the world itself demonstrate that light without shadow is chaos, and that the covenant is eternal, not because of power, but because of wisdom. The keepers spoke to the heirs at night, in voices carried by the wind, telling the tales of Seraphine and Kael, of the wars of two suns, of the trials on the plains of glass, and of the amber flame that preserves the balance of the world. And some of the heirs listened with curiosity, others with anger. Yet each felt the weight of history pressing upon them, a truth older than mountains, rivers, and deserts, reminding them that ambition alone breeds ruin. And when the heirs attempted to ignite the molten mirrors into a second sun, the amber flame responded, bending the fire into streams of gold and violet that cooled before they could harm, weaving shadow into brilliance so that the flames themselves seemed alive with memory, carrying whispers of the fallen kingdoms, the tears of Solara, and the wisdom of Kael. Many of the heirs faltered, stepping back in awe and fear, realizing that the world resists those who seek to dominate it without understanding, and that the covenant is not simply a relic, but a living force, demanding respect and temperance from every hand that touches it. Yet not all were swayed. A few, their hearts hardened by pride and desire for glory, sought to seize the amber flame, believing that to possess it is to control balance itself. And they struck at the keepers with weapons of fire and steel. Yet even their assaults were tempered by the latent power of the flame, which moved with quiet intelligence, shielding the innocents and reflecting the violence back upon those who had forgotten the lessons of Erythra. And for the first time in centuries, the air hummed not only with light and shadow, but with the memory of consequence, teaching all who witnessed it that the world itself will resist those who act in arrogance. And so, as the northern ambition flared and waned, the keepers guided, taught, and restrained, showing the heirs the cost of their desires without directly destroying them. For they understood that balance must be preserved not only in victory, but in survival, and that the age of balance endures only when the lessons of past pride are carried forward. The valley, once a cradle of hidden ambition, became a place of reflection where fire and shadow danced together, and where the heirs, humbled and enlightened, began to learn that the world thrives when brilliance is tempered with patience, and that the covenant begun in Erythra, preserved by Seraphine and Kael, and carried by the amber flame is eternal, teaching that ambition guided by wisdom creates life, while ambition guided only by pride brings ruin. And thus the first true trial of the Age of Balance came to its quiet conclusion, not with a clash of armies, but with the subtle victory of understanding, as light and shadow entwined, as the amber flame glowed softly in the hands of those who would protect it, and as the world, scarred but resilient, continued its eternal rhythm, reminding all who live beneath sun and moon that even forgotten ambition may rise. Yet it may also be tempered by vigilance, wisdom, and the enduring lesson of Seraphine and Kale, that balance is life, and that life, when guided by memory and humility, endures beyond all pride, all empires, and all time. And as the shadows of forgotten ambition lingered still in the northern mountains and hidden valleys, the keepers, guided by the amber flame, journeyed far and wide. For the covenant of balance is not preserved by memory alone, but by vigilance, and each village, each city, each kingdom must feel the presence of those who walk between light and shadow, reminding mortals that unchecked brilliance brings ruin, and that patience, humility, and reflection are the greatest powers a civilization can wield. Eryndor, now aged yet unwavering, led his companions through forests, deserts, and mountains, teaching not only rulers and scholars, but also the common people, who had never seen fire without understanding, that the sun and shadow are not enemies, but partners in the eternal dance of life. And wherever they went, the amber flame pulsed with quiet strength, illuminating both path and mind, and revealing not only the mistakes of the past, but the potential for wisdom in all who would listen. In the northern realms, the heirs of Aurion, tempered by their encounter with the keepers and the amber flame, began to rebuild their dominion under a new understanding. Yet even as they swore to honor balance, whispers of dissent grew among their followers, those who still longed for dominance and brilliance alone, who resented the restraint taught by twilight, and who plotted in secret to seize power once more. And so Eryndor called a grand council of keepers and scholars from every kingdom, declaring that an oath must be taken, not merely of obedience, but of vigilance, of dedication to the covenant, and of protection of the flame, that the world might never again be scorched by pride untempered by shadow. From the farthest deserts to the highest peaks, representatives gathered beneath twilight skies, bringing gifts, knowledge, and pledges. And as they knelt before the amber flame, they whispered solemn words that echoed across the lands, binding their hearts and their deeds to the principle that the balance of life and light is sacred, eternal, and non-negotiable. Yet the trials of this era were not only political, nor the ambitions of men alone. The world itself, scarred by centuries of untempered fire, presented challenges to the keepers and their charges. Rivers that had run dry flowed unpredictably with molten warmth. Forests grew too dense in some regions, suffocating the land. Deserts shifted, swallowing villages in storms of sand. And mountains rumbled with memory, recalling the weight of fallen empires. In every corner, nature reminded mortals that balance is a living, breathing force, and that even with wisdom, vigilance must never cease. The keepers walking through these lands learned not only to teach, but also to listen, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath their feet, hearing the whisper of winds that carried both warning and promise, and discovering that the covenant requires partnership with all life, not dominion over it. Among the newly sworn keepers arose a young woman named Lysera, whose mind was sharp as desert glass and whose heart glowed with the amber light of understanding. She journeyed into the northern valleys to meet the heirs of Aurion, and there, amid streams of molten metal and mirrors designed to capture the brilliance of the sun, she spoke of the covenant, of Kale and Seraphine, and of the cost of pride, showing them that the strength of the sun is meaningless without the patience of shadow. And though many resisted, some of the heirs began to understand, watching as the amber flame tempered their fires, bending brilliance without extinguishing it, revealing that mastery is not control, but harmony, and that the world itself resists those who seek glory without reflection. But the trials were not yet complete. For even as some heirs bent toward understanding, others secretly sought to forge weapons of light, to challenge the covenant, and to reclaim dominion over the land and sky. These conspirators moved with cunning, gathering knowledge from hidden corners, whispering to ambitious kings, and manipulating markets, armies, and resources, believing that their brilliance alone would triumph over the quiet power of the amber flame. And when Eryndor and Lysera perceived the stirrings of rebellion, they gathered a host of keepers, scholars, and vigilant warriors, not to destroy, but to intervene with subtlety, using the flame to illuminate truth, reveal ambition, and bend the world gently back toward harmony. For the greatest trials of twilight are often not fought with fire or sword, but with the careful shaping of knowledge, the guiding of hearts, and the patient correction of error, before it becomes catastrophe. The first great test of the Keeper's Oath came when a secretive cabal of northern lords unleashed a wave of controlled fire in an attempt to create a second sun within their mountain fortress. The molten brilliance seared the air, igniting forests and streams. Yet the amber flame responded with a gentle pulse, bending the rays, weaving shadow into the light, guiding rivers to cool the scorched earth, and showing mortals that ambition unchecked may burn, but understanding tempers the blaze. Many who had plotted dominion fell to humility, kneeling before the keepers and the flame, while others retreated in frustration, realizing that mastery of fire alone is meaningless, without reverence for the world that sustains it. And Eryndor, standing upon a high cliff overlooking the mountains and valleys, whispered softly to the amber flame, "Let this be the lesson for all who come after, that pride may rise, ambition may stir, but the covenant endures, eternal and unyielding, as long as there are hearts that remember and hands that guide." And so, through trials of ambition, the vigilance of the keepers, and the quiet guidance of the amber flame, the Age of Balance solidified its place in the world, a covenant not of kings or empires but of understanding, patience, and respect for the rhythm of day and night. The lands healed, forests and rivers flourished, cities grew with wisdom, and even the northern valleys, once hotbeds of unchecked pride, became regions of tempered brilliance, where light and shadow danced together in harmony, and where every generation learned that the lessons of Seraphine and Kale are eternal, whispered by the winds, sung by the rivers, and inscribed in the pulse of the earth itself. And thus, the keepers renewed their oath, pledging their lives to the covenant of balance, carrying the amber flame to every corner of the world, reminding mortals that the rhythm of light and shadow is life itself, that ambition must bow to wisdom, and that the trials of twilight are endless, yet conquerable through vigilance, humility, and the enduring memory of those who first tamed the sun and walked the deserts with the courage to bridge brilliance and shadow. And as the keepers upheld their oath and spread the wisdom of twilight across the lands, the winds whispered of omens long forgotten, and the amber flame pulsed with an urgency not felt in decades. For the world, though balanced, is never still, and even harmony bears the seeds of change. In the northern mountains, where glaciers gleamed like silver mirrors and valleys held the memory of past ambition, travelers spoke of lights dancing upon peaks at midnight, of shadows moving against the wind, and of voices that murmured prophecies in languages thought lost. Eryndor, sensing the stirrings of fate, called a council of keepers beneath the twilight sky, and there, with Lysera at his side, he read the signs that had been ignored too long. The rivers' altered courses, the restless forests, the tremors of distant deserts, and the strange flicker in the amber flame, which now seemed to pulse in patterns, as though carrying messages beyond mere illumination. Among the prophecies, carved in ancient stone and woven into the songs of the first keepers, was a warning of a time when the balance might again be tested by a force neither entirely mortal nor divine, a presence that would seek not conquest alone, but the very dominion over light and shadow, aiming to unmake the covenant itself. And as the council listened, a hush fell upon the gathering, for even the eldest keepers had long feared the rekindling of old ambitions that could awaken this hidden threat. Eryndor's eyes, reflecting the soft glow of the amber flame, scanned the horizon, where the first clouds of a distant storm gathered, not of rain alone but of energy, shimmering with hues of gold, violet, and shadow, and he understood that the world itself was preparing for the approach of an era unlike any before. Far to the east, scholars deciphered fragments of Erythra's lost archives, discovering cryptic instructions for controlling fire, not with mirrors or ambition, but through harmony with the cycles of day and night. And in these texts were hints of a forgotten relic, a crystal forged by Solara and Seraphine together, capable of amplifying the power of the sun and the wisdom of shadow in equal measure. This relic, long hidden, had become the focus of the heirs of Aurion, who remained ambitious, who believed that mastering it would grant them ultimate dominion. And yet the keepers sensed that its rediscovery could either preserve the covenant or unravel it entirely. depending upon whose hands held it and whose hearts guided it. And so Eryndor dispatched emissaries and keepers alike to trace the relic's path, their journeys fraught with peril, for the lands themselves, stirred by memory, tested those who moved through them. Mountains shifted, forests whispered, rivers changed course, and shadows lengthened to obscure paths, reminding all that the Covenant is not a simple artifact, but a living force demanding respect and understanding. In the deserts of Solara, once scorched and now vibrant under the tempered light, Lysera encountered a tribe who claimed descent from the first children of twilight, their elders recounting dreams of twin suns and golden flames, of the boy who became a bridge, and of a coming storm that would test the Covenant in ways the world had not yet seen. Guided by these visions, Lysera understood that the gathering threat was not simply ambition or pride, but a confluence of forgotten knowledge, hidden relics, and mortal desire, all capable of rekindling the ancient fires of Erythra if left unchecked. She traveled swiftly, her path crossing deserts, mountains and rivers, teaching, observing, and subtly guiding those who might unwittingly awaken the danger. For the Keeper's power lies not in domination, but in foresight and subtlety, in bending ambition to wisdom before it becomes ruin. Meanwhile, in the northern strongholds, the remaining heirs of Aurion debated the wisdom of the Covenant and the allure of the relic, their voices raising arguments of glory versus prudence, their hearts torn between the legacy of Kael's victory and the temptation of power unchallenged. And as they wrestled, the amber flame pulsed across the miles, sending quiet warnings, illuminating truth, and reminding mortals that pride may rise, but memory endures. And from the east and west, other forces stirred, kingdoms long dormant, scholars long silent, and creatures of myth whispered in hidden valleys and forests, sensing the shift of destiny and the gathering storm, each contributing to the complex dance of events that would soon culminate in a test unlike any the Age of Balance had yet faced. Eryndor, feeling the weight of centuries and the responsibility of guiding a world now teetering between peace and peril, climbed to the highest cliffs of Embercliff with Lysera at his side, the amber flame casting long shadows across the dunes, mountains, and forests below. "The Covenant has held," he said softly, his voice carrying in the cooling wind. "But balance is never permanent. Forces long forgotten awaken in secret, and those who remember must act before memory fades entirely." Lysera nodded, feeling the pulse of the flame as if it were the heartbeat of the world itself, and understood that their duty was no longer merely to preserve, but to anticipate, to guide, and to face trials that even Kael and Seraphine could not have foreseen. And as twilight deepened into night, clouds swirling with gold and violet upon the horizon, the Keepers vowed once more to protect the Covenant, to guide mortals in wisdom, and to watch the paths of ambition wherever they may rise. For the prophecy had rekindled itself. A hidden storm gathered, a force that would test light and shadow, ambition and humility, and the enduring law of balance. The ember flame pulsed steadily, a beacon of hope and vigilance whispering across deserts, mountains, forests, and cities, and carrying a single, solemn message to all who could hear. The age of balance is precious, but it is fragile, and the trials of the world are eternal, demanding courage, foresight, and the eternal wisdom of those who walk between sun and shadow. And as the amber flame pulsed quietly across the lands, illuminating hearts that still sought wisdom, the hidden relic, long buried beneath the shifting sands of Solara, began to awaken, sensing the convergence of ambition, knowledge, and memory, for the world itself remembers the deeds of mortals and the covenant of Kael and Seraphine. And when the first tremors stirred the buried crystal, the heirs of Aurion, still ambitious despite the lessons of twilight, felt its presence in their blood and bones, a call both terrifying and irresistible, whispering of ultimate power, glory untethered, and dominion over sun, shadow, and the rhythm of the world itself. Eryndor, attuned to the pulse of the amber flame, sensed the resonance from miles away and gathered the keepers atop the cliffs of Embercliff, their robes flowing like the tides of twilight, the flame glowing with urgency, reflecting a warning that the balance of centuries now faced a trial more dangerous than any before. Lysera, sent to the heart of Solara's deserts, followed the subtle signs of energy, observing shifts in sand, sudden blooms of glass flowers in unnatural patterns, and currents of heat that defied the normal rhythm of day and night. She understood that the relic, though dormant for centuries, now sought the hands of mortals, revealing not only its presence but its intention: to challenge the world, to test the covenant, and to demand vigilance from those who would preserve harmony. The amber flame, carried carefully in her hands, pulsed in tandem with the relic, forming a subtle conversation of light and shadow, and she whispered softly to it, guiding its power, ensuring that its awakening would not destroy life, but illuminate paths that had long been forgotten. The Heirs of Aurion, hearing rumors of the relic's emergence, journeyed from their hidden valleys and mountain strongholds, their hearts aflame with ambition, their minds sharpened by generations of desire for dominance, believing that this relic could restore the supremacy of their line and grant them control over the sun itself. Their armies, though smaller than those of the age of unchecked pride, were disciplined and fierce, carrying weapons forged in molten fire and refined mirrors designed to channel light, and their engineers prepared devices capable of harnessing the crystal's power. Yet even as they marched, the amber flame reached out invisibly, illuminating the path before them, showing glimpses of history, warning of consequence, bending shadows into caution, and reminding them, whether they understood or not, that power without wisdom is fleeting and destructive. The desert itself seemed to respond to the awakening of the relic, dunes shifting into intricate patterns that mirrored ancient constellations, rivers of heat twisting unnaturally across the sands, and the winds carrying echoes of Kale and Seraphine's covenant. Travelers and nomads witnessed strange phenomena, mirages of golden suns dancing beside soft violet shadows, whispers of voices long dead teaching lessons of humility and courage, and even the animals, instinctively aware of the disturbance, moved cautiously, avoiding places where the balance had been momentarily disturbed. Lysera moved among them with care, her presence like a tether, keeping the relic's power aligned with the pulse of the world, for she knew that a single misstep could awaken the ambition in mortals too far beyond restraint, bringing devastation not seen since the fall of Eryndor. When the heirs reached the outskirts of the relic's resting place, they encountered the first of the keepers, a delicate yet unyielding line of guardians whose eyes reflected the amber flame's steady light. Eryndor and Lysera met them there, standing upon dunes that glowed gold and violet beneath the twilight sun, and in a voice both calm and unwavering, Eryndor spoke to the heirs. "The relic is not yours to command. It is the covenant of balance, older than empires, older than pride, older than ambition itself. To touch it without understanding is to awaken ruin." Some of the heirs laughed, dismissing his words as the caution of the weak. Yet others faltered, sensing the truth in the amber glow, seeing reflected in it the cost of centuries past, the lessons of Kale and Seraphine, and the quiet but inexorable authority of the keepers. Then, in a single subtle moment, the relic stirred, a crystal radiance that filled the valley with a light neither purely sun nor shadow, but a mixture of both, pulsating in patterns that seemed alive, carrying memory and intent. The heirs who had sought to dominate felt their ambition tested instantly. Some were consumed with awe, others with terror, and those who tried to seize it without understanding were repelled by a force that was neither weapon nor magic, but the very rhythm of the world insisting upon balance. Lysera approached, carrying the amber flame, and placed it near the relic. The two lights merged into a single harmonious pulse, casting gold and violet across the sands, teaching even the proudest hearts that power is meaningless without understanding, that ambition must bow to wisdom, and that the covenant endures because it is eternal, not because it can be claimed. The heirs now faced a choice: to submit to the lesson of balance and integrate their ambition into the covenant, or to persist in pride, risking the ruin of their kingdoms and the lands around them. Many knelt before the relic and the amber flame, feeling the weight of centuries, the memory of fallen empires, and the quiet insistence of the world itself. and vowed to uphold the covenant, while a few, their hearts hardened by arrogance, retreated into hidden valleys, plotting once more, their ambition restrained but not extinguished. And Eryndor, standing with Lysera, raised the amber flame toward the sky and whispered to the winds, "Let this awakening be remembered. That light without shadow is incomplete. That power without wisdom is fleeting, and that the covenant of the sun and shadow endures, guiding all who live beneath it." Thus the relic, awakened but tempered, became a beacon of harmony, a testament to the age of balance, and a trial that reminded mortals, kings, and heirs alike that ambition must always walk hand in hand with understanding, and that the keepers, guided by the amber flame, remain vigilant, guarding the rhythm of the world, ensuring that neither pride nor folly can undo the covenant that Seraphine and Kael first forged, long before the first cities rose and the first kingdoms fell. And across deserts, mountains, forests, and rivers, the world pulsed with renewed life, its rhythm restored, its covenant renewed, and its lessons eternal, whispered by wind, sung by river, and etched in the amber glow that now bridged past, present, and the promise of a balanced future. And as the relic's awakening echoed through the deserts, mountains, and forests, forces long dormant and ambitions long restrained converged upon the heart of Solara, each drawn by whispers of power and the promise of dominion, yet unaware that the amber flame, carried by Eryndor and Lysera, had already begun weaving the strands of balance into a net that would hold even the most reckless hearts. The heirs of Aurion, now divided between those humbled by the covenant and those still burning with ambition, marched with armies both loyal and fractured, their banners glittering with gold and violet under the tempered light, while emissaries from distant kingdoms arrived, guided by dreams and the subtle pull of the amber flame, carrying knowledge, warriors, and wary hope. For even the farthest lands sensed that the first great reckoning was at hand, and the world itself seemed to respond. Rivers glimmered with molten hues, forests whispered prophecies through rustling leaves, and the wind carried patterns of light and shadow that bent across plains and mountains, as if the very earth was preparing to judge those who would wield power without wisdom. Eryndor and Lysera, standing atop the cliffs overlooking the valley where the relic lay, surveyed the approaching convergence, their eyes reflecting the amber glow, and spoke in low voices, for even in the calm, the pulse of tension was palpable. "This is the test of the age of balance," Eryndor said, his gaze sweeping across distant armies. "Not of force alone, but of wisdom, vigilance, and courage. The relic will reveal the truth of every heart that comes near it. Those who seek dominion without understanding will falter, and those who approach with humility will rise." Lysera nodded, feeling the rhythm of the world in the pulse of the amber flame, understanding that this reckoning was not merely a battle of armies, but of principles, of pride versus reflection, ambition versus balance, light against shadow, yet unified in purpose for the survival of all that lived beneath sun and sky. The first to arrive were the northern lords still hungry for glory, their engineers wielding mirrors and devices designed to channel and amplify the relic's energy, believing that they could seize it and bend it to their will. They stepped into the valley with confidence, yet the amber flame, resonating with the relic, pulsed outward, subtly bending light and shadow to reveal not only their intentions but their vulnerabilities, showing each soldier and general the cost of ambition untempered by wisdom. Some hesitated, seeing the subtle interplay of power and consequence, while others pressed forward, certain that brilliance alone would grant them victory, unaware that the world itself, through the relic and the flame, had already begun its judgment. Then came emissaries from the farthest kingdoms, arriving not with armies but with knowledge, instruments, and offerings of guidance, teaching their followers the lessons of dusk and dawn, showing that mastery of light requires patience and reflection, and demonstrating that balance is not merely a shield, but a bridge connecting ambition to wisdom. The valley, once quiet and empty, now thrummed with anticipation, the air charged with energy from every corner of the world, fire and shadow, ambition and restraint, knowledge and instinct, all converging like streams into a river of fate, carrying with it the potential for triumph or ruin. Eryndor and Lysera stepped into the valley itself. The amber flame held high between them, and the relic responded instantly, radiating a brilliance that was neither purely sun nor shadow, but the harmonious union of both, casting gold and violet light across the assembled armies, emissaries, and scholars. The Heirs of Aurion, divided between loyalty and pride, felt the relic's power pressing against their hearts, compelling reflection, humility, and understanding, while those still consumed by ambition found themselves repelled, unable to approach, their weapons of fire and mirrors faltering under the sheer force of balance. And in this moment, the first reckoning began, not with swords clashing or fires burning, but with revelation. Every heart in the valley was laid bare before the pulse of the world, illuminated by the amber flame and tested by the relic's awakening, revealing who sought harmony, who sought dominion, and who had yet to learn that power without understanding is fleeting. A tension like the heat of a desert noon stretched across the valley, as both sides struggled with the realization that the relic could not be claimed by force alone. The humbled heirs knelt, their ambition reshaped by insight, pledging themselves to uphold the covenant alongside Eryndor and the Keepers, while the proudest withdrew to hidden corners, restrained but still plotting, their defiance a reminder that vigilance must never cease. And the emissaries from distant lands, guided by the subtle influence of the amber flame, worked alongside the Keepers, weaving structures and rituals that channeled the relic's energy safely, ensuring that its power would illuminate life, not destroy it, demonstrating that even the most potent forces can be tempered when guided by wisdom and respect. Then, as the sun dipped toward twilight, the valley itself seemed to rise in judgment, sand and stone shifting, rivers of light bending across the dunes, and shadows stretching and intertwining with brilliance, creating a living tapestry of balance. Eryndor raised the amber flame high, and its pulse synced with the relic, creating waves of golden violet light that spread across the valley, reaching every soldier, emissary, and scholar, revealing the truth of every heart, showing the potential for wisdom in the ambitious, the strength of humility in the meek, and the inevitability of consequence for those who sought dominion without reflection. The first great reckoning, though without bloodshed, had begun, teaching all present that the age of balance is eternal, but tested continuously, and that only through vigilance, courage, and understanding can harmony endure. And as night fell across the valley, the relic and the amber flame glowed together, casting a soft radiance upon dunes, mountains, and forests alike, while Eryndor and Lysera, standing side by side, whispered to the winds, "Let this convergence be remembered, that ambition guided by wisdom creates life, that pride unchecked invites ruin, and that the covenant of light and shadow endures, as long as hearts remember and hands guide." And the world, scarred yet resilient, pulsed with renewed life, signaling that even in the midst of gathering powers, even in the throes of the first great reckoning, the age of balance holds firm, awaiting the next test, the next trial, and the continued vigilance of those who walk between sun and shadow. And as twilight deepened across the valley of Solara, the relic's brilliance flared, casting a golden violet glow across sand, stone, and the assembled armies, a signal that the world itself now demanded judgment, and that the first true clash of ambition and wisdom was at hand. The heirs of Aurion, who had embraced the covenant, stood alongside Eryndor, Lysera, and the Keepers, forming a line of guardians whose robes flowed like rivers of amber dusk, their weapons tempered by insight rather than pride. Across the valley, those still consumed by ambition, lords who had resisted the covenant, engineers of mirrors and molten fire, advanced with calculated fury, believing that force alone could bend the relic to their will, unaware that the world itself, through the amber flame and the relic's pulse, had already begun to test their hearts, revealing weaknesses, doubts, and the inevitability of consequence. The battle began not with swords or fire, but with the subtle weaving of light and shadow. As the Keepers released pulses from the amber flame, bending rays of the relic into ribbons of gold and violet that danced across the valley, illuminating both friend and foe alike, and compelling reflection in hearts too long hardened by ambition. Soldiers faltered as they saw visions of ruin, forests ablaze, rivers boiling, empires crumbling, yet interwoven with these images were glimpses of harmony, communities thriving under tempered light, children learning the rhythm of day and night, and the quiet, enduring power of balance, teaching that mastery is not conquest, but understanding. Many of the ambitious fell to humility in that instant, kneeling as the pulse of the relic and the amber flame reached deep into their consciousness, while a few remained resolute, their pride unbroken, willing to risk ruin for fleeting glory. Eryndor, standing upon a rise of dunes, raised the amber flame high, its glow synchronizing with the relic to create a dome of light and shadow that rippled outward like a tide across the valley. Within this dome, the keepers moved with precision and grace, guiding streams of light to soften attacks, bending shadows to protect the innocent, and weaving both into patterns that taught, restrained, and redirected ambition without destruction. Lysera, beside him, reached into the pulse of the relic with her own understanding, shaping its energy into bridges of illumination that connected soldiers to wisdom, turning battle into revelation, and ensuring that every heart could witness the consequences of unchecked pride. And in this moment, the valley became a theater of both confrontation and enlightenment, where the lines between combat and teaching blurred, and where the first wave of reckoning revealed the true power of harmony over domination. Yet even the combined efforts of the keepers and the humbled heirs could not immediately halt the forces of untempered ambition. Devices of molten light hurled beams that seared the air, mirrors focused the sun's brilliance into blades of fire, and engineers moved with relentless precision, testing the limits of the relic and the patience of those who upheld the covenant. The amber flame responded with resilience, weaving brilliance and shadow together to absorb, diffuse, and redirect attacks, creating corridors of safety, illuminating paths of insight, and revealing not only the futility of force without wisdom, but also the courage and strength of those who act with tempered ambition. And the world itself seemed to intervene. Rivers bent their courses to protect the land. Wine swirled to guide those seeking refuge, and even the sands shifted, forming barriers that favored the disciplined and punished the reckless, as if the covenant were alive, a guardian beyond human hands. As the battle reached its crescendo, the relic pulsed with radiant force, sensing the intentions and hearts of every being in the valley. The ambitious, unyielding in their pride, found their fire faltering, their devices misfiring, their strategies unraveling under the quiet authority of balance. Those who had embraced the covenant, guided by Eryndor and Lysera, moved in harmony with the pulse, their strikes precise yet restrained, their defenses both protective and enlightening, ensuring that no unnecessary blood was spilled, and that even the clash of arms became a lesson of consequence and restraint. And in the center of the valley, where the relic's light and the amber flame intertwined most intensely, a moment of revelation occurred. The proudest heirs who resisted the covenant were confronted by visions of ruin, not from external force, but from the world itself, showing the collapse of empires, the loss of lives, and the futility of brilliance without understanding. In this moment, the battle's tide shifted. Many of the resistors, overwhelmed by insight, fell to their knees, pledging allegiance to the covenant and to the guardians of balance, their hearts realigned with wisdom. A few, however, refused, driven by desire that even visions of devastation could not temper. For them, the amber flame pulsed in warning, the relic shone in judgment, and the combined efforts of the keepers became a precise containment, pushing back aggression without annihilation, demonstrating that balance is maintained not solely through victory, but through restraint and correction, guiding even the unyielding toward awareness. And in this first great reckoning, the age of balance proved its strength, not in the obliteration of the ambitious, but in the endurance of understanding, the shaping of destiny through insight, and the quiet but relentless authority of the covenant that Seraphine and Kale had first forged. as night fell and the amber glow mingled with the stars above. The valley quieted, the relic settled into a stable pulse, and the keepers, though exhausted, stood triumphant. For they had ensured not destruction, but enlightenment, not conquest, but enduring harmony. The humbled heirs knelt, pledging themselves to vigilance. The ambitious few were restrained, and the world, scarred yet resilient, resumed its eternal rhythm, rivers flowing, winds whispering, and forests breathing in unison with the heartbeat of balance. Eryndor raised the amber flame once more, its glow casting long shadows across dunes and mountains, and whispered to the wind, "Let this stand as a testament, that light and shadow must dance together, that ambition must bow to wisdom, and that the covenant endures, eternal, as long as hearts remember and hands guide." Thus concluded the first great battle of the Age of Balance, a trial not of destruction but of revelation, not of dominance but of understanding. And the Valley of Solara became a place of memory, teaching generations that ambition guided by wisdom creates life, that pride unchecked invites ruin, and that the keepers, with the amber flame and the relic, will endure as guardians of the covenant, ever watchful, ever vigilant, as long as sun and shadow share the sky. And as the Valley of Solara settled into the quiet glow of victory, whispers from hidden corners of the world began to stir, carrying tales of forgotten guardians long thought lost to memory, whose vigilance had once kept the most dangerous ambitions in check, and whose secrets now emerged like shadows at twilight, promising revelations that could either fortify the Age of Balance or shatter it entirely. Eryndor, sensing the subtle tremors in the amber flame, called the keepers to gather, their robes like rivers of dusk flowing across dunes and cliffs, and spoke in a voice that carried the weight of centuries. "The Covenant has endured this first reckoning, yet vigilance must not falter. Forces older than empires awaken, and knowledge once hidden must be sought. For the balance of the world depends not only on what is seen, but on what is remembered." Lysera, her eyes reflecting the amber glow, nodded, feeling the pulse of the world's memory in the sands beneath her feet, understanding that the trials ahead would demand courage, insight, and the revelation of truths long buried. Far to the east, in forests untouched by the fires of ambition, a hidden order of guardians, known only in ancient songs and half-forgotten prophecies, stirred from centuries of secrecy. These forgotten guardians had once maintained the equilibrium between brilliance and shadow, guiding mortals without revealing themselves, ensuring that knowledge and power were never concentrated in hands unready to wield them. Now, sensing the awakening of the relic and the convergence of ambitious hearts, they emerged from hidden sanctuaries, their robes stitched with symbols of twilight and dawn, carrying artifacts and wisdom that had not been seen since the age of Kael and Seraphine. Their arrival was silent yet profound, as if the world itself had called them forth. And when they touched the amber flame, its pulse quickened, resonating with a memory older than kingdoms, older than deserts, older than the first empires of sun and shadow. Meanwhile, distant mountains quaked with a restless energy, rivers of molten rock shifting beneath the crust, and winds carried strange harmonics that humans could scarcely hear, yet which spoke to the very rhythm of the world. These were signs of the looming eclipse foretold in the ancient prophecies, a convergence of celestial bodies that would cast both literal and metaphorical shadow across the lands, amplifying ambition, testing loyalty, and challenging the Age of Balance as no trial had yet done. The amber flame pulsed with both warning and guidance, its light stretching across the dunes and valleys, reaching emissaries and soldiers, scholars and children alike, carrying a subtle message. The world is about to be tested, and only those who understand the dance of light and shadow can survive the trial to come. Eryndor and Lysera traveled with the newly arrived Forgotten Guardians, visiting ancient temples, hidden archives, and deserted fortresses, uncovering manuscripts and artifacts that revealed the true scope of the Covenant, including techniques for harmonizing light and shadow, methods to temper ambition without stifling growth, and rituals designed to channel the power of the relic in alignment with the cycles of the sun and moon. Among these discoveries was the revelation that the eclipse itself could either amplify the covenant or destabilize it, depending on how mortals wielded the relic and whether the heirs of Aurion had truly embraced humility. This knowledge weighed heavily on Eryndor, for he understood that centuries of peace and balance could be undone in a single celestial alignment if hearts faltered and wisdom failed. In the deserts of Solara, Lysera and a select group of keepers set up a network of observation points, aligning mirrors, lenses, and the relic itself to track the approach of the eclipse. They worked day and night, blending science, magic, and the wisdom of the covenant, ensuring that the world's pulse remained steady and that no reckless ambition could exploit the celestial convergence. Meanwhile, the heirs who had pledged allegiance to the covenant trained under the guidance of both Eryndor and the Forgotten Guardians, learning not only to wield light and shadow but to sense the subtle shifts in intention, emotion, and consequence that the amber flame could reveal. Their discipline, patience, and insight were tested as never before, for the looming eclipse promised not only a trial of power, but a reckoning of character and understanding. And yet, even amid preparation and vigilance, signs of unrest appeared. In distant valleys and hidden strongholds, the few heirs and lords who had resisted the covenant stirred, plotting in secret, amassing small forces, and seeking ways to manipulate the eclipse for their own ends. They moved silently, yet the world itself, through the amber flame, the relic, and the whispers of the Forgotten Guardians, detected their schemes. Eryndor, understanding that subtle intervention would be required, dispatched emissaries and keepers to guide, restrain, and illuminate their hearts, aiming to prevent catastrophe without inciting rebellion. The stage was set for a trial of unprecedented scale, where light, shadow, ambition, wisdom, and courage would converge in a battle not merely of armies, but of principles, where the fate of the Age of Balance would hang in delicate equilibrium. As twilight fell and the first shadows of the eclipse began to stretch across the valley of Solara, the amber flame glowed steadily, merging with the relic's pulse to create a radiant network of energy that stretched across dunes, mountains, and rivers, touching every heart that had pledged to the covenant. Eryndor raised the flame high, speaking to all who could hear. The world has endured many trials, yet this eclipse will reveal the truth of every heart. Let those who seek wisdom be guided. Let those who seek dominance be tempered. And let all remember that the covenant of sun and shadow is eternal, and that balance endures as long as vigilance and understanding remain. And as the shadows deepened, gold and violet intermingling with darkness, the world held its breath, waiting for the convergence to arrive, for the first wave of the ultimate trial that would decide the destiny of all who lived beneath sun, moon, and the vigilant amber flame. As the celestial bodies drew closer to alignment, the sky above Solara shimmered with hues unseen in mortal memory, a tapestry of gold, violet, and deep shadow that stretched across the horizon, signaling the arrival of the long-foretold eclipse. The amber flame pulsed faster in response, a heartbeat for the world itself, while the relic, now fully awakened, radiated a luminous harmony that intertwined with the movements of sun, moon, and shadow, casting waves of light across dunes, valleys, and rivers, revealing the potential for both creation and destruction. Eryndor, standing upon the cliffs overlooking the central valley, felt the gravity of the moment in every breath, every pulse of the flame, understanding that this trial would test not merely armies or heirs, but the very principles upon which the Age of Balance rested. The heirs of Aurion, those who had pledged to uphold the covenant, stood alongside the keepers, their robes catching the shifting light, reflecting gold and violet across the sands. They had trained for this moment for months under the guidance of Eryndor, Lysera, and the newly emerged Forgotten Guardians, learning not only to wield the relic's energy, but to sense the subtle currents of consequence, intention, and wisdom that flowed through the world. Each step they took, each gesture, and each breath became a part of the delicate dance required to harmonize with the relic, ensuring that ambition would serve understanding rather than overwhelm it. And yet, even among these disciplined hearts, tension surged, For the magnitude of the eclipse promised revelations, temptations, and trials that could overwhelm the unsteady of purpose. Across the valley, the heirs who had resisted the covenant plotted in secret, gathering small forces of those loyal to pride, ambition, and the lust for dominion. They believed that the eclipse would magnify their abilities, that the relic could be claimed by force in the chaos of celestial alignment, and that the world itself would bend to their will. Yet as they approached the valley, the amber flame and relic pulsed in unison, creating invisible currents of illumination that bent their intentions back upon themselves, revealing doubts, fears, and the inevitable consequences of unchecked desire. The very earth shifted subtly beneath their feet. Dunes rose and fell like waves. Rivers of molten heat diverted their paths, and shadows twisted in ways that obstructed movement, teaching them, whether they understood or not, that ambition without wisdom is fragile and fleeting. Eryndor and Lysera moved among their allies, guiding pulses of the amber flame into patterns of resonance with the relic, creating bridges of light and shadow that channeled energy safely and amplified understanding. Soldiers, scholars, and heirs felt these currents, their perception heightened, their insight sharpened, as visions of past failures, victories, and the delicate rhythm of balance washed over them. The eclipse's shadow slowly crept across the valley, and with it came the first real test, the relic, responding to both celestial alignment and the hearts of mortals, began to draw forth visions of ambition's consequences, revealing scenarios of ruin and harmony that each person could feel as if living them. Many faltered, kneeling or stepping back, their hearts tested as never before, while others, steadfast in humility, absorbed the lessons, their confidence tempered with insight. The first confrontation arose when the resistors of the covenant, emboldened by shadows amplified by the eclipse, attempted to channel the relic's energy through crude devices, mirrors and molten fire seeking to force dominance. The amber flame responded instantly, merging with the relic's pulse, bending the energy not destructively, but into waves of illumination that reflected the true nature of each participant's heart. Ambition twisted without wisdom faltered, beams collapsing or redirecting harmlessly, while courage guided by insight strengthened and harmonized with the flow, creating a living network of energy that rippled across the valley. It became clear that this trial was not a conventional battle. It was a test of principle, an alignment of intention, where only those whose hearts resonated with balance could act without consequence, and only those tempered by wisdom could survive the celestial judgment. Lysera approached the central circle of the relic, her hands extending toward the converging energies, guiding its pulse into patterns of safety and revelation. The heirs who had embraced the covenant followed, each contributing their own understanding, their own discipline, and their own reflection of ambition tempered by wisdom, creating a network of harmonic resonance that stabilized the relic's overwhelming power. The shadows deepened, yet were softened by light. The brilliance intensified, yet tempered by insight, and the valley became a living embodiment of the covenant itself. Light and shadow entwined, ambition and humility interwoven, and the pulse of the world manifest in every dune, river, and ripple of the desert sands. Even the resistors who had once sought dominion now felt the weight of revelation pressing upon them. Some fell to their knees, their pride shaken by visions of ruin and harmony alike, their hearts softened by the undeniable truth of consequence, while a few persisted in defiance, their ambitions still untempered, yet restrained by the invisible currents of balance that bent both light and shadow. Eryndor, raising the amber flame high, spoke words that carried over the valley. Let all who walk beneath sun and shadow witness. Ambition without wisdom invites ruin, pride without understanding is fleeting, and the covenant endures because it is eternal, not in dominance, but in vigilance and guidance. And as he spoke, the relic pulsed brighter, responding not only to celestial alignment but to the resonance of hearts willing to learn, willing to adapt, and willing to serve the principle of balance above desire for supremacy. The eclipse reached its zenith, the sun and moon perfectly aligned, and the valley glowed in a harmony of gold and violet, a spectacle that reflected not only celestial forces, but the trial of mortals, heirs, and keepers alike. The first wave of the trial concluded without bloodshed, for the relic, guided by the amber flame and the disciplined hands of Eryndor, Lysera and the Forgotten Guardians had taught, restrained, and revealed, leaving only those who had embraced wisdom standing fully aligned with the Covenant. The ambitious few who persisted were neither destroyed nor victorious, but contained, their energies reflected back by the world itself, serving as a living reminder that unchecked desire cannot claim dominion over life, and that the Covenant's authority surpasses both ambition and time. As the shadows of the eclipse receded and twilight returned, the Valley of Solara pulsed with renewed harmony, rivers and dunes returning to their natural rhythm, forests breathing with calm, and the amber flame glowing steadily, a beacon of vigilance and understanding. Eryndor, Lysera, and the heirs stood together at the center, the relic resting peacefully, its pulse in perfect resonance with the world, and Eryndor whispered softly to the winds, "Let this trial be remembered, that light and shadow are inseparable, that ambition is powerful only when guided, and that the age of balance endures, eternal as long as hearts remain vigilant and hands guide." Thus concluded the trial of the relic, a celestial reckoning that tested not force nor pride, but the hearts, wisdom, and courage of all who lived beneath sun and shadow, marking a turning point in the age of balance, and setting the stage for greater revelations, hidden forces, and the ultimate confrontations yet to come. Even as the eclipse faded and twilight returned to the desert valley of Solara, whispers of hidden shadows rippled across distant lands, carried by wind, river, and memory, warning that the trial of the relic, though survived, had stirred forces long dormant and powers long restrained. The hidden shadows, ancient entities whose existence was entwined with ambition untempered by wisdom, began to emerge from secret places, abandoned fortresses, deep caverns beneath mountains, and deserts where the sun's light had never reached. These beings were neither fully mortal nor fully divine, their motives obscure, their power formidable, and their emergence signaled that the age of balance, while strengthened by the trial of the relic, still faced a confrontation unlike any before. Eryndor, standing once more atop the cliffs of Embercliff, felt the pulse of the amber flame quicken, sensing the rising threat of the hidden shadows, and he gathered the heirs, Lysera, and the Forgotten Guardians to convene a council beneath the twilight sky. "The trial has proven the strength of the Covenant," he said, his voice carrying across the dunes and valleys, "but it has also awakened forces that lurk beyond sight, beyond time. If we are to endure, we must not only guide ambition, but confront those who seek to unmake balance itself." Lysera, her eyes reflecting the amber glow, understood that this would be a battle not of armies alone, but of perception, courage, and the very essence of life and principle, where insight must surpass force and vigilance must endure beyond the obvious. Across the world, the hidden shadows gathered, weaving networks of influence, whispering to ambitious hearts, and bending the ambitions of mortals to their subtle designs. Cities awoke to strange murmurs, deserts shifted unnaturally, forests whispered warnings in languages long forgotten, and rivers glowed with unfamiliar colors, carrying signs of a disturbance that reached deep into the pulse of the world. The amber flame, resonating with the relic, sent waves of illumination outward, subtly countering the influence of the shadows, guiding those loyal to the Covenant, and revealing the invisible threads that connected ambition, action, and consequence. Every heartbeat, every step, every intention was measured, weighed, and reflected in the light and shadow of this rising threat. In preparation, the heirs of Aurion who had embraced the Covenant journeyed to distant fortresses, deserts, and mountains, training under the guidance of the Keepers and Forgotten Guardians. They learned to harmonize not only with light and shadow, but also with subtle currents of energy, the hidden intentions of mortals, and the quiet pulse of the earth itself. Lysera guided their understanding of the relic's resonance, teaching them that power is amplified not merely by action, but by perception, foresight, and alignment with the world's deeper rhythms. Even the ambitious few who had faltered during the eclipse were observed carefully, their potential for understanding measured against their continued desire for dominion, and subtle interventions ensured that their hearts might yet be guided without force. The first confrontation with the hidden shadows occurred in the northern mountains, where a faction of lords, seduced by whispers and visions, attempted to harness shadow energy to bend kingdoms to their will. The amber flame and the relic responded instantly, forming a dome of light and shadow that pulsed in resonance with the valley, reflecting the truth of each heart and testing their intentions. Those aligned with the covenant were protected, their actions harmonized with the pulse of balance, while those driven by untempered ambition faltered, their devices failing, their paths blocked by currents of illumination and shadow. Even as the battle began, it became clear that the shadow's power was insidious, influencing not through force alone, but through deception, ambition, and the manipulation of desire, and that the keepers must act with precision, subtlety, and insight beyond mortal comprehension. Eryndor and Lysera led a contingent of heirs and guardians into the heart of the northern mountains, where the influence of the shadows was strongest. There, hidden caverns shimmered with unnatural light, walls inscribed with forgotten languages, and air thick with anticipation. The hidden shadows emerged as silhouettes of impossible geometry, their presence felt in bone and breath, yet not fully visible, their power flowing into the ambitions of mortals nearby. The keepers, standing with the relic and the amber flame, moved in synchronized harmony, weaving currents of light and shadow, guiding, restraining, and illuminating, ensuring that no mortal fell wholly under the shadow's influence, and that the valley itself remained aligned with balance. A council of heirs, those tempered by the eclipse and trials past, worked in concert with the keepers, their combined understanding creating a resonance that magnified the amber flame and relic, forming a barrier of insight and principle against the shadows. Here, subtlety was paramount. Even the smallest thoughts of greed or pride were reflected back, amplified into awareness, teaching lessons of restraint and guiding hearts toward humility and wisdom. The hidden shadows, though ancient and cunning, began to retreat under the constant illumination of understanding, their influence resisted by the unwavering alignment of those who honored the covenant. In the Central Valley, emissaries coordinated defenses and monitored the ripple effects of the hidden shadows' emergence, ensuring that rivers, forests, and deserts remained in equilibrium, that cities remained safe, and that the pulse of the world remained steady. The relic, attuned to both the amber flame and the collective will of the heirs and keepers, responded dynamically, reflecting threats, amplifying vigilance, and reinforcing the covenant's principles in ways visible and invisible. Eryndor, surveying the valley from a high dune, whispered to Lysera, "Balance is not simply preserved. It is earned, maintained, and defended continuously. Even victory brings new trials, for ambition, shadow, and desire are eternal." As twilight deepened, the first waves of the final covenant were set. Hidden shadows restrained, heirs and keepers aligned, and the world itself resonating in harmony with the relic and amber flame. Across deserts, rivers, forests, and mountains, the pulse of the covenant spread like a living tide, carrying both warning and hope, preparing the world for the ultimate confrontation yet to come. And in that moment, the age of balance, strengthened through eclipse, trial, and revelation, endured, a testament to the vigilance, courage, and wisdom of those who walk between sun and shadow, guarding life itself against forces both seen and hidden. The hidden shadows, having gathered their strength and extended their influence across the distant mountains, forests, and deserts, now moved as a singular, ominous force. Their presence felt as a chill in the air and a subtle disturbance in the pulse of the world. Rivers shimmered with unnatural hues, sand dunes shifted like breathing creatures, and forests whispered warnings in languages long forgotten. Eryndor, standing atop the cliffs of Embercliff, felt the amber flame pulse urgently, its rhythm now faster, more insistent, as if echoing the heartbeat of the world itself. He turned to Lysera, whose eyes reflected both determination and caution, and said, "This is the moment the prophecies spoke of, the clash that will reveal the true nature of every heart and the destiny of the covenant." The heirs of Aurion, those tempered by the trials of the eclipse and the awakening of the relic, prepared themselves for confrontation, moving in disciplined formations with the guidance of the keepers and the forgotten guardians. Each step was measured, each gesture aligned with the rhythm of the amber flame and the relic, for they knew that brute force alone would not suffice against the cunning, insidious might of the hidden shadows. The shadows themselves moved as fluid entities, manifesting in impossible geometries, twisting light and reflection into illusions that sought to confuse and mislead, preying upon fear, doubt, and the unresolved ambition that lingered even in the hearts of the Covenant's allies. In the central valley, where the relic rested upon a pedestal of sun-bleached stone, the first direct clash occurred. The hidden shadows attempted to bend the relic's energy, sending waves of dark resonance outward, attempting to twist ambition into corruption. The amber flame responded instantly, merging with the relic's pulse to form a dome of interwoven light and shadow that rippled outward, countering the malicious currents and revealing the true intention of every combatant. Soldiers, heirs, and emissaries alike were tested. Those whose hearts aligned with wisdom found strength amplified, while those clinging to pride or untempered desire faltered, overwhelmed not by brute force, but by the reflection of their own flaws and the inevitability of consequence. Lysera moved at the heart of the dome, guiding the currents of light and shadow with precision, her hands shaping waves of energy that intertwined with the relic's pulse. She felt the resonance of the hidden shadows, sensing their focus upon the ambitious few who had resisted the covenant. In a moment of insight, she realized that the shadow's power relied not solely on destruction, but on deception, twisting perception, magnifying doubt, and preying upon moments of hesitation. Channeling the amber flame, she created a network of harmonic currents, connecting the heirs and keepers, forming a living lattice of wisdom and courage that reflected the shadow's energy back upon them, neutralizing their influence without annihilation. Eryndor, observing the battlefield from a high dune, called forth the heirs who had been tested during the eclipse, the ones tempered but not yet fully aligned. "Now is the time," he said, his voice carried by wind and sand, "to stand fully with the covenant, not as conquerors but as guardians. Let your ambition serve wisdom, your courage guide restraint, and your actions preserve balance." One by one, the heirs stepped forward, their hands touching the amber flame, their hearts synchronized with its pulse, and their minds aligned with the relic's rhythm. A wave of golden violet light spread across the valley, reinforcing the dome, and for the first time, the hidden shadows recoiled, sensing the unified strength of hearts aligned with principle, discipline, and insight, yet the shadows were cunning and relentless. They shifted into forms that mimicked allies, creating illusions that tempted the unwary, distorted perceptions of distance and time, and projected visions of personal glory to those still wrestling with pride. Eryndor, Lysera, and the forgotten guardians moved among the heirs, teaching them to distinguish reflection from illusion, principle from temptation, and consequence from desire. Each heartbeat, each step, each choice became part of the larger resonance, a test of alignment with the covenant, and a trial that measured not physical strength, but the clarity and integrity of intent. The valley became a battlefield unlike any other. Light and shadow intertwined in living patterns. Reflections of ambition and consequence danced upon dunes and rivers, and every action reverberated with moral and cosmic significance. The hidden shadows, feeling the tide turning, unleashed a final surge, concentrating their energy toward the relic in an attempt to fracture its harmony. In response, the heirs and keepers combined their focus, channeling both the amber flame and the relic's pulse into a concentrated beam of golden-violet resonance, a manifestation of the covenant's principle that light and shadow, ambition and wisdom must coexist to endure. The surge collided with the shadow's assault in a burst of illumination that rippled through the valley, revealing every hidden intention, unmasking deception, and dissolving illusions that had misled mortals for centuries. In the aftermath of this clash, the hidden shadows retreated, their forms unraveling into whispers of memory and light, their influence diminished by the unified strength of the Covenant. The heirs, tempered through trials of eclipse, relic, and confrontation, stood vigilant, their discipline tested and proven. The amber flame, glowing steadily at the heart of the relic, pulsed like the heartbeat of the world itself. A living reminder that the age of balance endures not through dominance, but through vigilance, wisdom, and the harmonization of ambition with principle. Eryndor, Lysera, and the Forgotten Guardians gathered in the Central Valley, their eyes reflecting the golden violet light of the relic and amber flame, and spoke to all who remained. Let this day be remembered not as a victory of power, but as a testament to the endurance of balance, the wisdom of reflection, and the courage of hearts aligned with principle. The hidden shadows have been restrained, but vigilance must remain eternal. The Covenant endures because it is eternal, as long as those who guard it remember the lessons of light, shadow, ambition, and restraint. And across deserts, mountains, rivers, and forests, the pulse of the relic and the amber flame radiated outward, touching hearts near and far, carrying a subtle, enduring message. The age of balance is not a static inheritance, but a living principle, tested continually by ambition, tempered by wisdom, and preserved by those courageous enough to act in alignment with truth. Thus concluded the clash of destinies, the trial of the heart of the relic, and the most formidable confrontation yet faced by the Covenant, leaving the world scarred, enlightened, and ready for the next chapter of its enduring saga.